In this video, I will be performing the Passacaglia Variata in D minor by Johann Caspar Kerll. Kerll was born in 1627 and died in 1693. Kerll was a cosmopolitan composer. Although he was born in Germany and initially studied with his father, he also studied in Vienna and Rome. And he also worked in several cities, including Brussels, Munich, and Vienna. Needless to say, his compositions often display his cosmopolitan outlook. The Passacaglia Variata was included in the collection Toccate, Canzoni et altre sonate per suonare sopra il cembalo o organo, which was published in 1676 in Munich. A passacaglia consists of a series of variations over a repeating bass pattern and is usually in triple meter. I have mentioned in previous videos that if we were to generalize a bit, German composers tend to stick to the pattern fairly consistently, while French composers tend to transform it so that the pattern can almost disappear behind its transformations. Kerll, following German practice, is pretty consistent in his use of the bass pattern throughout the piece, although he introduces subtle creative deviations that provide variety. The pattern he uses is one we find frequently in other passacaglias of the 17th century, as well as numerous other musical contexts. It is a descending minor tetrachord, which symbolizes sadness and despair, and is famously used as the opening melodic idea of John Dolan's Flow My Tears. Kerll's Passacaglia is also in triple meter, which is what we expect, and each note of the tetrachord occupies one measure, so that each complete statement, or variation, occupies 4 measures. Here is what the first statement sounds like. In other words, the tetrachord is here, this one. The piece contains a total of 40 variations. I have already mentioned that Kerll pretty much maintains the tetrachord pattern throughout the piece, but he almost never presents it in exactly the same way. In many instances, we get ornamented statements of the tetrachord, as for example in Variation 4. And Variation 4 does this. In other words, we still have the tetrachord, but etc., etc. Sometimes the tetrachord is going to descend chromatically, like for example in Variation 6. So here we have some variations are going to be a little more complex. In Variation 13, for instance, the bass line, rather than descending from D to A, actually ascends chromatically from D to A. So, and this is what this variation sounds like. So we get an almost chromatic ascent. And after G, we break the pattern and we'll go directly to A. In variation 14, the descending tetrachord is shared among the musical lines. So let me play you now variation 14. So what happens is we start. Here is now the D in the right hand. Here's the C. Here's the B flat. And now the A is going to be in the left hand. So again, this is a little bit of a more complex working out of the main motive. Kerll's Passacaglia is one of those pieces that is very satisfying to play. And in case you decide to play it yourself, which is something I would strongly encourage, I would say there are 3 variations that might present some technical challenges. So here are my suggestions on how to approach them. The first one is in variation 24 and involves having to trill for a fairly extended amount of time while also having to play other parts simultaneously. Let me show you this variation, and just to make things a little easier, I am going to play everything a little more slowly so you have time to process what is happening. So what we have here is the left hand has a figuration like this, and the right hand has to trill. Etc., etc. So we have to do all of this at the same time. So what happens here is that the only way to play this in a way that will sound flowing and natural and will also allow you to maintain the speed of the trill is for your hand to be very relaxed. Of course, that's easier said than done because a constant trill doesn't give your fingers a break, so to speak. So here's a little trick. Every time you have a melody note, you can momentarily stop the trill and continue again right afterwards. Let me show you what I mean. Here's what's written. Etc., etc. And notice what I'm going to do now. So every time I play the melody note, I go etc., etc. It may seem like an insignificant change and no one will probably notice, but you will be surprised what a difference it can make in keeping your hand relaxed, since it breaks the pattern and gives your thumb a moment to breathe, so to speak. The second passage involves the right hand tremolo in variation 30. My suggestion for that spot would be to imagine doing this not so much with your fingers, but with your wrist. In other words, think of this motion and try to apply it when playing this passage, which is this one. And again, I played it a little more slowly than what you will hear in the performance, but the idea is not to use my fingers so much, but kind of use my wrist, kind of transfer this motion to the harpsichord. Finally, there is a fast passage for the left hand in variation 33. It's this one here. Etc., etc. Here I would offer two suggestions. The first would be to not think of this as one continuous stream of notes, but try to differentiate between different patterns. So, for example, when I played it, you probably heard me doing and I'm exaggerating a little bit just so you can hear it a little better. The second suggestion, which relates to the first suggestion, is to use fingering that will aid in grouping all these notes into patterns. So now this is going to be simply my recommendation, or rather my way of doing this. You may want to do it in a different way, and I will tell you where what I do may be not the most common solution. So what I do first is, the first thing I have to do is basically just play 5 notes. So here, of course, we use our 5 fingers. Now, what happens afterwards, where I have to descend one note and then go up the scale, notice what I'm going to do. So I have these 5 notes. And right before I go to D, I'm going to lift my 4th finger, put it here. So I break the pattern. What this allows me to do is to differentiate between the different phrases. But also, if I put my 4th finger on the D, I have enough fingers to complete the ascending scale. I would do the same thing when we do the same pattern starting on C. I lift. Now, the third time we have to do the pattern, here is where things get a little trickier, because now we start on B flat. Now, normally most people would say, don't necessarily put your 5th finger or your thumb on a black key, or in this case a white key, an accidental. And you could theoretically do it this way. I'm actually playing it with a 5th finger because personally, at least, it helps me maintain the pattern that I've started. It doesn't present, to me at least, any problems, and it keeps my phrasing consistent. So maybe this is not the most historically correct thing to do, but to me at least, for me, I should say rather, for me it works. So I do this. And then, because of what's going to happen later, I'm going to lift my finger. And this is how I would play the remaining of that passage with this type of fingering. But again, this is my way of doing it. It works for me. But you may want to also try different things. The main point here is that you want to choose a type of fingering that allows you to play this at a certain speed. but also allows you to differentiate and group these notes into different patterns so that it doesn't all sound like one undifferentiated stream of fast notes. Finally, some comments regarding my choice of tempo. Because I've been a very avid music listener throughout my life, in the past few years, I have made a point of not listening to any recordings of pieces I'm currently playing or I am about to play, because I like my performing choices to reflect as much as possible my own understanding of the music and not be influenced by any other performances. However, while I have not listened to any other performances of this Passacaglia in the past few months, I had listened to them prior to that time. And from what I remember, I'm pretty sure that, comparatively speaking, my performance is on the slow side. Now, it goes without saying that there can be no such thing as a single correct tempo for this piece, especially as tempo, or better said, our perception of tempo, can be influenced by so many other parameters. So my comments here are simply meant to describe my own approach and are not in any way conceived as a criticism of other performers' approach. As a matter of fact, I would strongly encourage you to listen to multiple performances of a piece, because each performer will bring out different perspectives. One of the factors that influenced my choice of tempo was the significance of the descending minor tetrachord. I wanted to establish a serious and solemn character from the very beginning, and I felt that this character should be present throughout the piece. The tempo I chose also allowed me sufficient time to differentiate and shape individual phrases in a more rhythmically flexible way. And in general, given the character of the piece, I did not want virtuosity to overtake expression. As always, thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoy the performance.